could do it a couple different ways. I mean, or if you want to just hand it off after you do it to folks on this side, and then the other side has their own mic. I mean, how much talking are you going to be doing? It's mostly that.
It's mostly me.
The folks instead of going all the way over, they just have their own mic there. So that far mic for the
Thank you all so much for coming. This is really exciting. My name is Nicholas Acapenti. I am the Government Affairs Director of the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. Lived in Grand Rapids most of my life and in West Michigan, and moderating tonight's panel with this esteemed group of folks. I want to thank all of you for coming, and of course online. We're broadcasting this live on social media, and we'll have a bigger audience there and an audience in the room, and really excited to engage on this important issue. We have an opportunity tonight to dive deeper here with some lawmakers who directly helped shape the 100% clean energy legislation in Michigan. And I'd like to start by acknowledging the work and the vision of the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Brinks, and Representative Fitzgerald. For your thoughtful contributions to this work and unwavering support of clean energy and jobs. And personally, clean energy is an issue I've cared about all my life. Coming up as a child during the first Gulf War, and I'm dating myself a little bit, I couldn't understand why the United States was at war in the Middle East with fossil fuel interests at its strategic center, all the way to local pollution, smog on the ground level when we're walking around in town and driving, cardiovascular and health issues, and of course, one of the great existential threats of our time, and that's climate change, where Michigan just experienced a lost winter. Businesses up north in the UP decimated by the loss of that opportunity. And these panelists assembled before you, and many of us here today care deeply about these issues as well. And this legislation that was passed last year allows Michigan to strategically transition to a clean energy future, one that's going to deliver good jobs, opportunity, and ultimately a higher quality of life. So what do the bills do? I'm just going to give a brief overview to stir the thinking, to get the conversation started, and then we're going to turn it over to the panel. And we're also going to open it up to the group here today with questions. So the bills call for 100% clean energy by 2040, and that's from our power sector, 50% renewable energies by 2030. They increase the state's energy efficiency requirements and expands them to include municipal utilities and co-op utilities. Energy efficiency, of course, is the cleanest, cheapest, and most quickly deployed source of energy of all. The bills also enact high labor standards, the highest of any package in the country, creating thousands of good-paying jobs by ensuring prevailing wage, project labor agreements, and explicit hiring and training in low-income communities. Bills add teeth to regulate Michigan's big energy utility companies, making the state the most progressive in the country when it comes to measuring environmental justice and health safety impacts. The bills position Michigan to leverage billions in funding from the federal government, bringing that into Michigan, moving money to grow our clean energy sector and Michigan's energy independence. And they boost a tenfold increase in what's allowed on rooftop solar in homes and businesses locally. So I hope that spurs a little bit of thinking as we go here. And we're gonna have staff. Some of you had the comment cards in hand. We're gonna have a portion of Q&A you can hand those comment cards in. There's some available up there. And we'll make sure to get you involved in the conversation. At the moment, I'd like to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. And we'll start with Robert on the far end, and then make our way, and our first question will be for the Senate Majority Leader. Robert?
Thank you, Nick. Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert George. I serve as the Director of Government Affairs for the Michigan Laborers District Council. My union, the Laborers, we represent over 15,000 active and retired members across the state of Michigan. We perform many of the critical infrastructure work on all the things that you use to get around, as well as man many of the energy facilities across the state. So when you're thinking about bridges and roads and dams, as well as manning all of our utility projects, from solar to wind to geothermal, to all of our power plants as well. Those are our members, hardworking men and women that help make everything in Michigan run. Originally, I'm from Ohio, which is a controversial comment anywhere I go in Michigan, but happy to be in Michigan and representing folks here on this panel, working men and women, so that in these conversations that we don't have a repeat of some of the mistakes, the policy mistakes that have been made in the past when it comes to some of these transition moments, and that we are making sure that economic justice is part of environmental justice and ensuring that no one gets left behind. So, thank you.
Awesome, Robert. Really excited to be here with everyone. My name is Marshall Kilgore. I serve as the Director of Engagement for the West Michigan Environmental Action Council. We call ourselves WEMIAC, and I've been telling my colleagues it's hilarious. We say WEMIAC like it's MTV, like folks are gonna know what that means. But we were founded in 1968. We have an 8-county coverage from Montcalm to Kent, Ionia, Berry, with a primary focus in the Grand Rapids, Muskegon, and Holland metropolitan areas. So really happy to speak to these bills. I serve as our Director of Engagement, so connecting with the community on what they truly care about, and I'm happy to have worked with both of these legislators to really carry out what their constituents truly have been telling folks like us in environmental agencies for decades that they needed and wanted to see in their community. And I'm also happy to be pushing for internally for our communities, our 8-county coverage, environmental justice. Robert spoke a little bit about that, but how do we make sure that we have within our laws equity for all folks, frontline communities, people of color, youth, and these bills did just that. So very happy to be here with you all today.
Thank you. I've got the cord draped over the Senate Majority Leader here. So if she cuts me off, that's why. So I'm John Fitzgerald. I'm a state representative for the 83rd House District, which you are currently in. That's the city of Wyoming, Southwest Grand Rapids, and also a precinct of Byron Township as well. I'm serving my first term as in the state legislature. I started here actually locally on the city council, so served for 2 years as a city commissioner here in the city. Now serve on 5 committees in Lansing, but I do chair local government. I think that with the backdrop of today's discussion, though, I think it's important to really understand what it is that I am fighting for in the voice of my community, which is we want better economic opportunity. We want to create spaces and places where we are proud to live and work. We want the opportunity to get a good education. Not only K through 12, but as early as we can. We're talking about pre-K in Lansing right now, but we also want to give upskilling and continuing education opportunities once you leave that K through 12 system. That's really been the heart and soul of the 83rd District. I'm happy and proud to be carrying out those initiatives in Lansing, and really appreciative of being here tonight to talk about this great and transformational policy.
I am Winnie Brinks. I am the state senator for the 29th Senate District, which includes half the city of Grand Rapids. It also includes Kentwood, Wyoming, and Granville, as well as East Grand Rapids. And it is my second term in the state Senate. So before that, I served 3 terms in the state house. So I'm the old one here and the veteran professionally. But I've been concerned and working on and active in issues of environment, clean water, clean air for many years, and to finally have an opportunity to work on that in this past year and produce this package of bills that you described so well is a great privilege, and I'm really pleased to be here at this point in my career and to be able to make such a difference in this way. So I don't want to get into the first question because I kind of know what he's going to ask me.
Yeah, we're going to be sharing the mic. You do a little an old school style here. We don't have any wireless right now, but and also as you're crafting as you're crafting your questions, please tailor them to the clean energy topic tonight. Obviously, with such esteemed representatives and the Senate Majority Leader here, we can talk about a lot, but we want to stay focused on the 100% clean package. As we kick it off, Senate Majority Leader Brinks, as the first Democratic Senate Majority Leader in 40 years, you seize the opportunity to lead your caucus to pass transformational climate and clean energy legislation. Tell us a little about your motivation for doing that and why making this a priority is such important, and delivering it to the people of Michigan was so important for you.
Yeah, as I didn't mention this earlier in my intro, but I am the parent of 3 daughters. They are all in their 20s, and when they were small children, it was incredibly clear to me as a young mom that it's just really, really important what kids eat, the air they breathe, the water they drink. And so I was always really conscientious about all of those things as a parent, and I soon realized there's so much that happens around us that we can't control in our individual households. And so I started looking at bigger things and reading and becoming much more aware of my surroundings and what could be done, what is being done, what needs to be done. And I started to become politically active around issues of education with the kids, and as well as issues of environment. And so this is sort of my personal motivation and background over the last 20 years or so. But I became frustrated with what you can do as an individual and started realizing that we really need to work on changing policies. We really need to work together to make systemic changes if we want to make a big difference. And we have spent far too much time in Michigan and, well, frankly, in the United States, blaming individual habits and individual consumers. Like if you just recycle that can after you empty the beans out of it, or if you just put that water bottle in the right bin, you know, that maybe we'll be able to fix it, implying that if you don't always recycle every single item of plastic that you come across, that it's your fault that now we have global warming consumers. And so I was really frustrated with the framing of the whole thing. So when I came to the legislature, I continued in the minority for 10 years to try and push good policies. When I came to the Senate 5 years ago, I served on the Energy Committee, and it was incredibly frustrating. It was, you know, no bills in front of us, almost no bills, and there was perpetual presentations on topics that wouldn't move the needle or make a difference on global warming, on impacting the clean energy future that we knew we could usher into Michigan with the right policies. So when we got the trifecta and started setting our agenda last year, for the first time in 40 years, we were in a position with a pro-conservation or pro-climate, I wanted to say climate change, but I mean change in the right way, on the policies that could impact the future for our kids. And for all of our constituents. So we got right to work immediately looking at what that could be. We started meeting with stakeholders, started gathering our thoughts and our ideas, and we're able to put this bill package together. And we're incredibly proud that we were able to usher in such, nationally speaking, in the scope of policies that are out there that have been successful. This was just a really quite assertive and progressive package. Especially considering the history here in Michigan, where there was so little progress for far too many years. And for us to be able to do that in a state that's purple, really, politically, as well as having very, very slim majorities of, pro-climate action legislators was a really tough row to hoe, but we actually got it done, and we're immensely grateful for all the people who helped get that legislation all the way to the governor's desk, and of course to the governor's leadership for signing it and for helping along the way.
And this next question will be for all the panelists, so please, if you're interested, to opt in. What aspects of the Clean Energy and Jobs Act should the average Michigander, folks in the room today, folks watching online, be excited about? What should they care about? What are the nuggets they need to know? Representative, kick us off.
So I'm a young father. I've got a daughter at home who's less than 2 years old, and I think that this is so exciting for me and a number of families in my community because this really is an investment in our children's futures. This is a generational policy that's going to help to improve the health outcomes and the situation that they're in, both in urban and suburban environments as well as rural environments too. We're talking about an opportunity to make sure that our natural resources, our land, our air, our water, are protected against mass energy production that is harmful to that. When we talk about wind and solar being the core renewable sources that we want to pursue, that energy is free and it's there, and it's something that doesn't require the burning of fuel to accomplish that goal. And I think that that's really what is so exciting about this to young families in West Michigan, because we know how truly fortunate we are to live in a place where we're 40 minutes away from Lake Michigan. We're 15 minutes away from getting into a forest. We're probably 5 minutes away from getting to a farm. And that's really unique because we're also 5 minutes away from downtown Grand Rapids, the second largest city in the state. And so because of that perspective and the opportunities that are afforded to my daughter and some of the children who are here with us tonight, is that this is going to make sure that they have a healthy future set forward with them that is going to also protect the natural beauty and bounty of Michigan. That's what I'm most excited about seeing here because of this legislation.
You know, to echo a little bit of what the representative said, I think it's, you know, what this trifecta has done across the board in so many different areas is being proactive. It's tackling the difficult problems that our state has had that have not gotten the attention that they've needed over the last 40 years. And I think, you know, this is a prime example of one of those types of issues. And, you know, being able to be on the forefront instead of on the back foot on the pressing issue, one of the pressing issues of our time, I think is something that all Michiganders should be excited about being a national leader, that instead of being, you know, in the last, you know, 10 states, the last 15 states as we have been on some of these issues, that we're leading. And that is something that I think inspires people, especially folks and younger folks across our state, that there is leadership that is willing to take on the really tough problems like climate change and do it in a way that is forward-thinking, inclusive, and results-driven. This isn't just messaging. This isn't just talking points. This is going to fundamentally, this legislation is going to fundamentally build out our state's energy infrastructure in a way that will deliver reliability, good-paying jobs, and a clean future for all that I think it will be the envy of the country. When we look across what else has been done in other states, that this legislation really is pioneering in many different ways that I know we're going to get into a little bit more. And it's also on a timeline that's among the soonest of any of the states that have gotten it done. 2040 with the net zero target there is a very ambitious target I think that we're going to be able to meet. But I think, you know, the forward thinking, the energy, and the aspirational goals that are actually going to be met, I think is something to everybody should be lifting up.
You know, Nick, you said sort of like the average Michigander, or I always say what your neighbor cares about. So as someone who works at an environmental agency, you're really in the weeds with these things, but I like to speak right to where folks can understand. And so a clean energy future by 2024 means less harmful emissions, right? So this bill package really spoke to a very holistic, or gave an answer to a problem holistically, right? So we carve out this clean energy future that will then directly positively impact our health. WMEAC got to pair with Just Air Solutions. If you all haven't heard about them yet, I would look them up. They've got this awesome user-friendly dashboard. They've got about a dozen in Grand Rapids and all over our state of air monitors to talk about emissions and to talk about how we know that communities of color are already overburdened by harmful emissions. So this package, carving out a clean energy future, will truly be a holistic solution to helping our frontline communities that are already really overburdened by this issue. And to speak to, I talked about that a little bit earlier, but folks have been excited and concerned about some of these environmental issues for decades. I've also gotten to look at WMEAC's archives going back to 1968, and folks have been talking about solar and renewable energy for decades. So folks wanted to sort of write this off as a very leftist, very political move by legislators, but yet we had constituents from those 8 counties in Michigan who've been talking about this stuff for decades.
So historically, and I think we've all felt this at times, Michiganders paid the highest rates for electricity in the Midwest while having some of the poorest service quality, reliability in the country. How does this package of bills directly affect electric rates? to the extent that we can predict or project? And what can we say about any changes to service quality? Senator Brinks, do you want to kick us off? And it's open to everyone.
Yeah, the cleanest energy that we can produce right now is from wind and solar, but it's also the most affordable new energy that we can create. And as the demand for energy goes up with so many things requiring energy in modern life, and hopefully with our population as it starts to grow, there is a huge opportunity here for us to achieve efficiencies. So we want to, of course, produce clean energy first and foremost, but we also want to use less of it. A component that hasn't been mentioned yet is that we added the capacity for building storage so that we can even out the use of energy and then therefore use even less by being able to produce it at cheaper times and then use it at peak hours. So there's all kinds of ways that this is beneficial in terms of creating cost-effective and cleaner energy for all the families that we use and that will use it. And that will, of course, save people money. It will help improve health. It will create more stability. It will we probably won't need to reduce our need for strengthening the grid because we are so far behind, but it will enable us to use the grid well that we have and to work to strengthen it strategically. So I'm just really excited about the way that those different elements were able to come together in this bill package. I will just add, no bill package is perfect, and so there's always a little give and take. There are things that we can improve, and I hope that as technology advances, we see the impacts of these policies, that in 5 years or whatever point is appropriate, that if the legislature sees ways that we can do better, that they will pick up their pens again and start looking at ways to make our energy cleaner, to make sure that we're impacting health in a more effective way, to make sure that energy is even more reliable, to make sure that we're using new technologies for energy efficiency. All of those things are evolving incredibly quickly. This bill package put us in a position to be ready for what's next and to really be cutting edge when it comes to preparing our population and our workforce for those good jobs that will be created as we move through this transition. So it's a really incredible moment for us and one where we'll continue to be able to see positive change.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people consider energy policies as like, wow, that's really expensive. We hear about the billions of dollars that need to be invested in order to make sure that we have the infrastructure required to do these things effectively. But what does it mean for individual consumers, individual households? We have modeling that shows that by 2035, the average household will save about $145 a year, which is a week's worth of groceries or an opportunity to go out to dinner. And I understand that it might look like this amount in the overall budget, but that's savings because we do know that this is the cheapest, most reliable energy we can create. And I think that that's, when we look at Michigan's energy future, we're onshoring Michigan's energy. We're not requiring on the billions of dollars of energy imports through oil and gas that are coming to Michigan. It's made here in Michigan. That is something that we can depend on. And so when we talk about reliability, we're also making sure that it's also the shortest route because it's right here in Michigan. There's also modeling to show that when you talk about fully electrifying, right, we all have right now probably mostly have a gas heating source. Your furnace is probably natural gas right now. But if we can move that to electrification, we're looking at potentially, when you're looking at heating and cooling, transportation and otherwise, it's $1,200 a year. And so as we continue to adopt and we continue to implement these into our, I would say, everyday infrastructure needs, this is going to make a lot of difference. And energy efficiency is also the second component of this, because since 2009, so 15 years, Michiganders have saved $6 billion in energy costs already That's really what we're talking about, the impact that if we can go to this electric and renewable future, that's the kind of difference, and those are the types of dollar amounts we can be talking about year after year after year. And that's what's really exciting about this for every household in Michigan.
I jokingly say to folks, if you and I did our job like our utility companies did their job, we wouldn't have a job. And it's a joke, but it's a sad joke, because we think of these environmental justice communities, communities of color, our frontline sisters and brothers, like on the east side of the state, when we had strong winds, when we had ice storms. West Michigan fares okay. It's still not the reliability isn't as good as it could be, but the east side of the state saw a lot of really difficult reliability issues in terms of the utilities. I think this set of bills really helped in terms of holding the utility companies accountable, right? We've got to work with them. Certain folks, I think Lansing has their own sort of utility, but we don't really have that right on the west side of the state. So we do have to work with them, but they should be held accountable for being reliable. You're giving a invaluable resource. So I'm happy that this empowered the Michigan Public Service Commission to fight back a little bit with utility companies. And I think, like the representative said, I think every American right now could use a few dollars back in their budget. So very happy to see that as well.
I think I just add a couple of brief points here. The reliability aspect that I know that's been touched on before, that isn't necessarily a quantifiable issue, but when folks lose power, they can't work, they lose groceries, they lose the ability to do many of the things in their daily lives, and that cost is hard to quantify, but that's something that with this increased reliability that we're going to see with the additional battery storage to ensure that the power stays on even when the weather isn't the greatest, is something that will be a long-term savings that I think every Michigander will be able to benefit from. And then another benefit that, again, is harder to quantify is the health benefits that are going to come from this, from better air, from cleaner water, from these types of things, the reduction in pollution from some of the legacy infrastructure costs. That, again, is going to be a savings to everyday Michiganders, and that especially in some of our areas that have been hardest hit by pollution, that'll be a sizable savings, and something that I think that we, as folks that are advocating for the future of Michigan's energy infrastructure, need to highlight even more and remind folks that times are changing, and the air that you breathe and the water that you drink will be better because of the actions that this legislature has taken on these policies.
So you've heard from us that the least cost option is renewable and efficient energy. And I'm going to provide some data for you. The Michigan Public Service Commission has tracked this data across administrations back to the previous Governor Snyder and before, and multiple legislatures. So the MPSC says that 2022, the latest numbers that we have, the levelized cost of energy from coal, $133 per megawatt hour. Don't need to worry about that. That piece will hold it constant. The levelized cost for energy from renewable sources, such as solar and wind, $64 per megawatt hour. It's like, how could this be? Well, the technology curve has pushed the costs down, and we don't pay for the fuel. It's essentially summing up a complex calculation into its simple outcome, and that translates into savings. When you talk about energy efficiency, with Representative Fitzgerald highlighted, we're not building new plants that you all would have to pay for, that we all would have to pay for together. And by not building those new plants, we're all saving money. So the estimate is that for every dollar invested in energy efficiency, we save $3. So thank you so much for all your comments on that question. Moving on to the next question here for the panelists. The Clean Energy and Jobs Act drew widespread support from environmentalists and union leaders. What are some of the aspects of these bills that show a clean energy future will go hand in hand with a bright future for Michigan workers? And Robert, I'm going to kick that off to you first, but please, as with all these questions, feel free to weigh in others.
Thank you, Nick. And I'm very glad you asked this question. In my opening remarks, I talked about being proactive and leading on an issue, and I think that's a really important point to stress here. When we look at some of the past decisions at the federal level, for instance, on trade and the impacts that some of those decisions have made on Michigan, and the impacts on the working class across our state with deindustrialization and offshoring. There wasn't a plan. There was not an effective plan for what to do when those things happened. And workers got left behind. Communities got left behind. Poverty went up. Mental health issues spiked. Crime increased because when these plants left, they ripped out the economic and social fabric of these communities. And they were left with very little. There was the structures, the support systems, the things that we were supposed to do as a society to help each other when things don't go as we expect them to do, weren't there. And so I bring this up almost every time that I get a chance to talk about this issue, because Michigan is doing it right with this energy transition. With the Worker and Economic Transition Act that sets up a whole office within the Labor and Economic Opportunity Office, department I should say, in state government, the ability for workers that are displaced or that need retraining because their jobs have changed from coal, from oil, from natural gas, that there will be new jobs for them to be transitioned into. There will be the opportunities to be connected with training. There will be opportunities to be connected with employers, and that the ability to coordinate outside resources and bring them into Michigan is something that doesn't exist right now, but it will as this department gets set up. And it's something that will ensure that some of these hardest hit communities with, when we're talking about some of these coal plant closures that employ hundreds of workers, and some of the larger coal plants employ upwards of 1,000 workers. And that's not even talking about all of the workers that are dependent on the folks that work in those plants. So it's about transitioning not just the workers, but also the communities to ensure that communities that have a large dependence on a single power plant for their tax base are able to find other ways to recoup some of that revenue with state support. And with the upcoming budget releases, I fully expect that we're going to see some strong funding from our partners in the legislature and the governor's office to support this office that's going to be set up this year, and to make sure that when we have this transition going forward as a point of pride, that this is the most encompassing and most comprehensive office of any state that's been set up in the whole country, that is also the first to include manufacturing workers beyond just the building trades, which I represent, but to ensure that our folks that are currently manufacturing ICE engines, that are our traditional combustion engines, are also included in this, so that in the EV transition, that we're not leaving behind folks on that side of the economic side as well, that we're including a comprehensive plan for our workers to ensure that we don't have a repeat of what happened in some of the decades that have been in the past.
Great point, Robert. Once again, trying to uplift some of our most marginalized communities, folks who have been previously incarcerated, could get into what WMEAC is calling green jobs. I just had a wonderful presentation from a gentleman talking about how many steps it takes to dismantle one of those little vapes, the little flavored nicotine things. Wow, these are skilled jobs. These are jobs that will give folks acclimating back into society dignity, and that's what we need. Once again, I keep wanting to highlight how these package of bills were not this fighting or pushed from one group. This is a holistic approach for our state, and hopefully will help some of our most forgotten about neighbors. So I would love to see green jobs helping some of our folks coming back.
And I would just add, you made great points about displaced workers or other folks who've had barriers to employment, but this is also a fantastic opportunity as this whole sector grows. We've created the demand for the workers that will create, the solar panels, install those, maintain things. So these are fantastic opportunities for young people, and a lot of them are fields that are pretty accessible in terms of having a lower educational barrier to entry. And so there are some folks that are in various trades that are gearing I say kids because my kids are in their 20s, but you know what I mean. Young people are able to access that kind of education that they need, and in some cases, in a matter of months, they can be qualified to be part of a team of people who's doing these installations in a year and a half or so. And then they also, if they're part of a unionized workforce, have those continuing opportunities for education, so they can evolve in those opportunities and move up in this career while they're already employed, making good wages. And all of that is created by the good public policy that we have put in place to require a certain amount of our energy to come from clean energy sources. So they need to build it. And instead of building a coal plant or a gas plant, now they're working at building clean energy sources. So those solar fields, those wind turbines that you'll see going up, all of those really stand for good jobs.
I'm just going to add one final thought here, which is this is not just about jobs. It's about careers. We are accelerating an entire industry segment and its presence here in Michigan, that with that educational barrier potentially not being there or going onto a job site with skills training, this is going to open doors to new career pathways that will last a lifetime in Michigan as well. This is a really exciting time that I think if you are looking at how do I transition to that next or a sustainable career pathway, this is going to help open that door for you. And that's what's, I think, really exciting for a lot of communities who may have not have an industry that has been reliable to them locally, that this is going to help them enter into a new industry across the state.
Yeah, thank you so much. In addition to the wonderful union and prevailing wage opportunities, there's explicit measures in this legislation directing our major utilities to hire from low-income communities, diverse communities, and do that in a way that welcomes people into the workforce. So thank you, Marshall. I think you were alluding to those comments as well. You know, when I think of what brought me into this work and the first Gulf War and my time in grad school is really trying to understand U.S. national security and environmental issues, and the connection was clean energy, and the solution was clean energy. As panelists, as you think about this bill package and making Michigan more energy independent, what clean energy benefits are coming to our communities and our economy that can make us more independent from this bill package? Who wants to start us off?
So the tax money from this will be just transformative. In Grand Rapids, due to historic factors, just the way we set up both our nation and our state and our cities, we have places like where I live, Southeast Grand Rapids, that have historically lacked investment. Now, we've done things. I'm the chair of our Vital Streets Oversight Commission, where we put that on the ballot. That's a millage. It's a tax. Where we're basically crowdfunding to do really important projects. So we are sort of working our way back and making up for years, decades upon decades of lack of investment, doing things like starting with sidewalk projects in the 3rd Ward in Southeast Grand Rapids, because we know there has been historically a lack of investment. Now, we had to go to the ballot for that. We had to take up taxes for that. And I think generating new revenue sources from these measures will be wonderful, because we won't have to do sort of the usual way when we need to influence infrastructure. Things that, once again, of going towards that holistic or full circle, right? Things that we can all use. So I'm hoping that that will contribute to infrastructure, and green projects within our neighborhoods would be wonderful as well. Folks want to see more parks and more trees planted, and hopefully we can use that, the money that we generate from these, this green energy for that.
And, you know, to build a little bit on what Marshall has highlighted here, you know, Michigan imports $18 billion worth of fossil fuel materials every year to keep our lights on, to keep our homes heated. And, you know, I think one of the things that's really undersold about this package is how patriotic it is. We are on, as Representative Fitzgerald mentioned earlier, we are onshoring the vast majority of our energy production so that we are building the materials in Michigan, and we're generating the energy in Michigan. And I think that's something that, you know, the more that we can be as self-reliant and be able to provide for our communities and not have to spend money to send to folks to for other reasons and so forth, that we can keep that money here in Michigan and invest it in our other infrastructure needs, like roads, like our schools, so that savings is a point of pride and another point of how this legislature is putting Michiganders first by thinking not only of the savings, but also about how we can be the most productive and independent state we can be.
And I would say that you know, all these, this isn't just a job creation thing through like big companies doing things. There's going to be these smaller companies that pop up who are able to participate in this economy. They're already here. It's a way to build generational wealth. If you have good jobs in communities that are building out this clean energy infrastructure, they can invest in their homes. If we're saving money on our energy bills, you can invest in your home or your education or save for retirement or do other things that make your quality of life good. So keeping those dollars here in Michigan is really instrumental in so many ways, and it's not just about saving money on your energy bill. It really has a lasting impact on what you can build here for yourself in terms of you know, a job that you can create a good life around, own a home, and you know, leave something for your kids to enjoy.
So let's get into some of the tough questions here, and let's jump right in. You know, what happens when the sun doesn't shine, like it does every night, and the wind doesn't blow? Is the grid going to go dark? Are lights going to turn off? Representative?
Well, this was a top priority in terms of crafting this legislation. People want to know that when they flip the switch, that it goes on. When the heat needs to kick on, it goes. And really, the status quo for our energy system in Michigan right now is just not working. And first, nothing is more important than ensuring that energy is reliable, resilient, accessible. But when you talk about what happens when the sun doesn't shine, well, it would be good if we had a battery there. Well, we do. We wrote that in. We have battery storage for 2,500 megawatt hours of, just megawatts of energy in reserve. And that's really important to making sure that there is that backlog or that energy that's been produced that can be called upon in those times of peak hours or on a cloudy day, which we're used to here in West Michigan, aren't we? But the fact of the matter is that this energy gets created naturally. And I also pose this question with another question. What happens when there's an oil spill? What happens when there's a war that kicks up gas prices? What happens when there's something that happens 3 states away that impacts our own energy reliability? That's the alternative to this. We are making sure that we have the belt and suspenders to make sure that we have the energy we need, that when Michiganders need to turn the lights on or keep their house warm for their kids, that it's there and that it's dependable. And so I wanted to really hit on the fact that there is battery storage here, which gives us that backstop to making sure that we are ready and prepared for any Michiganders' needs.
Yeah, and then to speak to that, so the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator is focused, so that's the entity that operates their regional grid that includes Michigan, that is their specific job, right? And that's why we were really, at WEMAC, really happy to champion these bills, is because they're people-centric, right? Moving away from being utility and business-centric and seeing what's good for business and more towards amping up and supporting things like MISO that will allow for that battery to operate and for us to be covered when the sun doesn't shine.
Excellent. Moving to the audience questions. We'll keep the names anonymous, but kicking us off with community solar. What darlings were killed in the process of crafting this bill? And what will we have an opportunity to go for with a larger majority? And again, what is the specific status of the community solar bills? Have one of the representatives kick us off, or Senator?
We had tons of conversation about community solar in the process of writing these bills. We had a very high level of commitment to working to keep community solar or smaller scale solar installations as part of this. It was, again, I will return to my earlier comments about no package being perfect. We would still continue to explore community solar because there still is a great deal of interest, but at the end of the day, the votes simply weren't there for the configuration of things that we were able to coalesce around with the legislature that we have. So there's still significant interest. There was a hearing in the House late last year, I believe, on community solar. You will continue to see that conversation in the Senate as well. We're not going to let go of that concept because we believe that that can be instrumental as well. But at the end of the day, what we did have the votes for was those larger solar and wind installations, and those are where you get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of being able to move the needle on moving toward clean energy in those significant installations. So we're very pleased that those are there, but we think that we can impact additional communities in really significant ways by adding elements of community solar. It just may take a little while before we can get those actually to be part of our policy portfolio at this point.
Yeah, I want to add, you know, we talked about coalescing around an issue. You know, you've got 10 people at your Thanksgiving dinner table. Do you all agree on this, on every item there? No, you don't. And in Lansing, we've got almost 15 Thanksgiving dinner tables that we got to compete with. We got to make sure that these are issues that we can bring everyone together, because we're not trying to keep people out of this issue. We want to bring people in. And when it comes to community solar, I want to look back on a task force that I was a part of last summer. It's called the Energy Reliability, Resiliency, and Affordability Task Force, and we went all over the state. I went to Flint. We came here and held a meeting in Grand Rapids, and we went to Benton Harbor and Detroit. What I heard at those meetings was that Michiganders do prioritize reliability and resiliency, but what they're really focused on is that they're really talking about how do we build creative solutions to our energy system here in Michigan. And this isn't going to be the only solution that we're going to come forward with between now and 2040. It's going to be a complementary system that will continue to adapt, continue to supercharge our economy, continue to put responsible climate impacts in the headlights, but that this is really setting the stage, but that there's going to be more complementary solutions that come forward down the line as well. And I think that that's just something, not one thing that will fix this. It's going to have to be a continued and decades-long conversation about how we continue to make Michigan stronger.
Thank you. This question is about federal investments. What state-level investments in renewable and alternative energies are being made in light of the federal posture? And the word here was stall, but I want to make sure I'm reading that correctly, because I think it's not actually a stall, and there's that money flowing towards the state, but love to hear your opinions.
Yeah, I think knowing that there was a posture of being very interested and invested in clean energy future on the part of our federal counterparts and the Biden administration in particular, we were able to draw down dollars, and I can't give you amounts now off the top of my head, but there is significant federal investment that we were able to add to in terms of the state commitment and taken together that can really help us jumpstart the work that needs to be done in terms of building the structures, the infrastructure that we need for a clean energy future, but also it helps with matching dollars and things like that for energy efficiency programs, especially those things that are targeted at low-income folks. So we were able to build on what the Biden administration was making available to states, but we needed to have the policies in place through a bill package like this in order to be able to take advantage of those. So that really strengthened our hand and enabled us to have much more ambitious commitments toward clean energy future in terms of our goal that we set, but also in terms of really pushing the utilities to meet those goals. We could say these are the resources that are coming to the table, and for those reasons, we know this will be tough from their perspective in some ways to meet the goals that we put out and to keep things affordable. They certainly made that very clear to us, what might be difficult, but we knew that we needed to push really hard to ensure that they were doing the best possible things that they could because of all those other things that we value, right? We wanted to have the clean energy so we have the positive health impacts. We wanted to make sure that kids have clean air and clean water. We wanted to make sure that we're seeing reduced rates of asthma in communities. We wanted to make sure that we are creating those good jobs. We wanted to make sure that they couldn't come back to us in 5 years and say, there's this huge new demand for energy because of, all these data centers or AI or I don't know what. Everybody has an electric vehicle now. We need to produce more electricity instead of gasoline. We didn't want them to come back to us and say, we need another coal plant or we need another natural gas plant. We wanted to make it so clear that the only choice for building new energy is going to have to be a clean energy source. So things like wind and solar, things like storage. So that's how the whole thing worked together, and really we would not have been able to get as ambitious a package with these aggressive goals, particularly in the state of Michigan, where we hadn't had these productive conversations for so many years in the legislature, or frankly, a legislature that was motivated and willing to take the risk to take this vote. It all created a synergy that was necessary for us to get this done.
And I think the Senate Majority Leader highlighted the importance of willing partners in Michigan. I just want to make sure that folks are aware that, this is a truly once-in-a-lifetime moment that we are living through. The amount of federal dollars that are available for matching programs, as she mentioned, as well as implementation grants, is truly unprecedented. And the fact that we've got great, competent, smart people leading our state government that are going to take advantage, that are taking advantage of these opportunities, is going to benefit everyone. In many states across the country, states are actively rejecting this money. They are not putting applications in. They're campaigning against it. They're turning money from the federal government down because they simply ideologically are opposed to some of these projects that we're talking about here. And I think that's an important thing to note as we look across the country, that how fortunate we are in Michigan to have people that are willing to put people first and not these types of interests that have not always had the greatest outcomes for Michiganders.
So a lot of our infrastructure is aging, particularly when we think of the grid, and it can't currently handle the growing electricity needs. How much will these bills affect and or support the grid? And is there a long-term focus on bolstering the grid? Representative?
Silence as the mic comes my way. When I talked about that energy task force that I was on last summer, that is probably the number one thing that Michiganders hit on, is we want to make sure that we have reliable and resilient infrastructure. Does everyone remember when that huge line of storms came through last year that pretty much went from Grand Rapids, where the first tornado touched down, I think just up by Rockford, and made its way across the state? Kent County was pretty spared from widespread outages. The last time I had an outage at my house, it was because a driver hit a pole, right? We're very fortunate that we haven't had such widespread reliability issues. But I think that what we really need to focus on with this legislation is that it is a strengthening, it's a hardening, if you've heard that term before, of the grid. It's making sure, again, the source of the energy created, it's the shortest run between a Michigan-owned property and the consumer. It's not taking a second path to get to its end user. We know in looking at Michigan's landscape of energy too, that things like tree trimming and being responsible with the infrastructure that we have is also of the utmost importance. If you have above ground infrastructure, you need to make sure that there aren't obstructions. But to bury a wire, which sounds, hey, that's a pretty good idea. Some of us probably live in neighborhoods with below ground infrastructure. It costs multiples to put it in there, especially when you're talking about a repair. A line goes down on the street, you see the guy climbing the pole, we're putting it back together, bing, bang, boom, we're out of there. But it's underground when you're digging up somebody's front yard. And that's also, I think, a good point here is that we want to be a good neighbor. We want to make sure that people have, I would say, unintrusive modernization to this grid. These bills will affect the resiliency, the hardening of that grid, and I think that the investments are also going to be done, again, with great labor that's going to create great careers in Michigan, and that's really important component here when we're talking about people being having dependable energy throughout Michigan.
I would also say that a good portion of the grid infrastructure is regional. I think Marshall was mentioning MIDA. And so federal dollars can help strengthen those more regional grids that will help us when there is a crisis, and they can move energy around better if we have a functional grid, of course. We still recognize that here in Michigan, with our smaller chunks of grid that we are responsible for, our energy companies are responsible for, that needs improvement. So we built in more opportunities. You know how you'll hear once in a while on the radio, if you listen to Michigan radio, I know they report on this, but the utilities have to, if they want to raise your prices, raise your rates, they have to go to the MPSC, the Michigan Public Service Commission. This most recent round that one of the companies has requested a rate increase for involves raising more dollars so that they can put more money into things like tree trimming and making the above ground grid much more resilient. Those are really important things, and they do cost money, but we also built in opportunities for our constituents and citizens to be able to have a larger voice at that table when the MPSC is hearing those rate cases and hearing the big energy companies make those arguments of why they think they need to raise the rates, so that we can have more accountability for that. But we're also just really staying on those companies that are responsible for maintaining those lines and for making sure that the trees are cut away from them so that the power is reliable. But maybe perhaps the biggest thing that we can do for our grid is just energy reduction, energy use reduction. So as technology advances and we do become more efficient, that's helpful. As we provide dollars, which we do in this bill package, for homeowners to buy energy efficient appliances. We incent that, or we help make sure that those are more affordable. Being able to seal up the envelope on your house so that you don't have to spend as much to heat it. That's energy we don't use, that we don't need to send through the grid, and that will make the grid just that much more workable for the energy that we need, if that makes sense. So all of those things will work together to move us in the right direction, and I will just end with, I think that will be one of our biggest challenges in the coming couple of decades, is making sure that the grid is strong enough to do what we are going to ask of it as we move toward a more electrified and cleaner energy future.
So Michigan LCV is an all-of-the-above scale approach to the clean energy future rollout. That means rooftop solar, community solar, utility scale solar and wind. So as this infrastructure starts to move near people's businesses in town, maybe into their communities, into rural Michigan, you started to go there, Senator. What protections are in place for those that are leasing their land for wind turbines, for the protection of the land, and what accommodations for the neighbors of those turbines?
I would say that this was one of our most difficult conversations, and one of the toughest issues to crack in terms of being able to figure out what we can do and what is best for communities and for folks who own land that want to lease it to do things like solar array or windmills, whatever that is. So we built in those opportunities for people to be able to exercise their rights on their own personal property, to be able to lease and to generate income by producing clean energy. A lot of people are very excited about that prospect. In some cases, it allows them to keep a farm that was in their family for generations, and to be able to have an additional source of income that helps make that affordable is an important tool in many communities. There is always, and even with community solar or with individual homes that install solar, there's always a chance that a neighbor doesn't really like what you would like to do with your own property. So we had to really work hard to strike a balance between that individual right as well as the impact on folks around these installations. That's not always easy. We worked hard to build in setbacks and to build in considerations and opportunities to communicate about how that looks, how far away is it from a structure, a house, a property line, a street, those kinds of things. Clearly not everybody is happy about that, but we did the best that we could to balance those rights and those responsibilities in a way that made the most sense and that we could get the support for to move this bill package forward.
Yeah, I'll just say that, you know, as local government chair in Lansing, we baked in to this legislation that the requirement for local input on these issues. We're not saying to the local governments, you have no control over this. We're actually saying, we need you at the table. We need you to be a part of this, because if I have a neighbor who paints their house hot pink, and I might not like hot pink, but maybe if we had a community meeting about it, an opportunity to talk about, maybe it's just a different shade of that pink, we can actually develop a better outcome for neighbors and communities across the board. That's actually what we're trying to do with this legislation. Make sure that local leaders, local communities have their needs heard and met in the development of this. And when we think about energy transfer in the state, so many things are controlled by the state government because they have health, safety, and economic concerns included. And that really does rise to the level of state importance. Oil pipelines, for example, are cited at the state level. And so when we talk about the partnership between locals and the state, this bill really does a good job of making sure that those two intersect when it comes to preserving individual property rights and the integrity of our communities. And that's what I think has really come through in the final product of this legislation.
One other thing to add to the benefits that communities will receive from this is the increased tax capture that they're going to have for these installations. You know, when you're talking about some of these rural areas, their township, their village budgets are very small, and that sometimes that these installations will triple, quadruple, quintuple their operating budgets, allowing them to provide more services to their residents to make sure that that they're increasing their quality of living. So not only are they getting energy that is reliable, that is independent, that is locally sourced, but they're also receiving increased community benefits because of the added tax revenue that the local municipality is covering. About $60 million annually, according to our chair over there.
Excellent. We're getting close to the end time here, so I only have opportunity for one more question, which leaves 3 on the table. I can commit to getting answers on these questions up on our website. I'm looking at our comms folks to make sure that we get those answered. If you have an opportunity and are milling about here at the end too, you might be able to get answered that way. This last one has a little bit of a preamble, so bear with me for just a second. We know there is a long divided history of environmental activism. Practices of people of color and indigenous groups have existed in the shadows for generations prior to white groups with privilege getting involved in environmental protections and activism. At the same time, people of color and low-income indigenous communities have been mostly negatively impacted by harmful businesses and utility practices today. I know there are specific details within the bills and ensure jobs and training, and clean energy focuses on communities most impacted. The question is, how do we build trust with these communities as we determine how the changes in funding are rolled out? Who would like to kick us off?
Nick, Can you say the last
Marshall?
part of that? How do we ensure trust?
That's correct. How do we build trust with these communities as we determine how the changes in funding are rolled out?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of programs right now. We did an event last year with the Senate Majority Leader about the IRA and the Justice 40 part, and how activists are saying and pushing leaders like the Senate Majority Leader to lock arms with us and say that 40% of the benefit, like Justice 40 says, is 40% of the dollars, right? Putting back into our community. So I think that's a huge part of this, is putting our money where our mouth is, right? Of making sure that specific dollars are going into our frontline communities. That's a big part of this. A big part of this, like the Senate Majority Leader said, is we also have to check back into this. So this can't just be a one-stop thing. We have to see in a few years, did this positively affect frontline communities? Can we go further? Should we do more specifically for youth, for folks of color, for folks who are differently abled? How did this package work out? I think that's a huge part of it. MLCV also did this beautiful youth-led rally in where youth got to sort of lobby in Lansing. And, you know, I think all of, I hate to get partisan, and we are nonpartisan at WMEAC, but sadly, some of the Republicans said no, that folks couldn't come to their office to have these good conversations. But the folks here and most of the folks who voted for this said yes. I think that's a part of it, having an ongoing conversation, like the senator said, about community solar, being open to the conversation, hearing folks out and saying that you're actively working on it is how we're going to build trust. Letting us be at the table and putting money towards our communities is how we establish that trust.
And we could talk about, you know, the jobs. We could talk about the energy efficiency dollars that we insisted were disproportionately targeted towards communities that are disproportionately impacted by negative impacts of climate change or pollution, for that matter, or, you know, things like coal plants. But I think this is a bigger question than what's just in these bills. We have an unprecedented amount of diversity in the legislature now, and not just a more diverse legislature than we've ever had at any point in history, but those folks who come from diverse communities now have gavels in their hands and are making the decisions about what bills move. They're making decisions in the course of this conversation about this legislation. They're at the negotiating table. They are, as Marshall said, inviting people from their communities, which are more diverse, which are more representative of the impacted people, and they are listening. And we are trying to build those ideas into our policy responses. It doesn't mean we're there yet. We have a lot to learn. We still have an uphill battle, sometimes talking with our colleagues to get them to understand the importance of talking about the disproportionate effects on people of color, people who live with the barriers of poverty, people who live in old houses. And those tend to be folks with just fewer resources and less social capital. But for the first time in the history of Michigan, they have been welcomed into our offices to talk in a serious way with people who care about those issues. And that is why, you know, we can talk about the diversity of our caucus. I don't know all the stats for the House Democrats, but for Senate Democrats, we're majority women. We have 4 children of immigrants serving in the Democratic caucus. We have people representing communities of color, whether it's Latino or African American or others. So this is the moment where those voices have actually been the closest, and not just the closest, but sitting at that table, making those decisions, writing the policy, and ensuring that those voices are heard. So we're not done yet. We still need to keep working on this. And when I'm out of the legislature and John is still there, and we have to revisit energy policy, it is my hope that an even larger group of those folks will be at the table in meaningful ways having those conversations.
Okay. Okay, we're going to do a rapid fire closing here. So can we do 20 seconds each? 20 seconds each where you're going to grab kind of the most important or most poignant thoughts that you have left and that you want to share with the folks that are here in the room today. Who would be so kind as to kick us off? Robert?
Thank you, Nick. You know, again, I want to reemphasize a couple of points I've made already tonight. Michiganders building Michigan. Michiganders building Michigan's infrastructure for the future with great wage, great benefits, great training opportunities, and the insurance that the requirements that are going to be put in place to protect workers are upheld, that we aren't leaving workers behind, that we aren't leaving communities behind, that we're ensuring that we're thinking ahead so that we're making sure that we are well planned and well resourced to ensure that we are successful. And I think that, once again, you know, this is a patriotic package that puts Michigan at the forefront nationally on all of the issues that we've talked about here tonight, but also builds a brighter and a better future for all of us in the state.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much for spending your Thursday evening with us. I'm really happy to have the conversation. And the whole theme and why I was really happy to join this conversation is environmental justice. Our state is being a leader in environmental justice and finally taking accountability for the history. We don't have to be marked by it. It doesn't have to be what we go by now, but we are actively laying the foundation for a brighter future for some of our most vulnerable and marginalized communities. Folks of color, women, youth, folks who are differently abled will hopefully feel as though they have a brighter future here in our state, and this is what this package does. So thanks again for coming tonight.
So I'll just end by saying, you know, this conversation really encapsulates that we want to build a bigger, better, brighter future for Michigan. We have an opportunity to supercharge our economy, create new skills for our community members, to make more money, to build a brighter future, a cleaner future for our young people that is going to make sure that Michigan's natural beauty continues to come through for generations to come.
This is just an incredible moment for us. You know, last year we were so busy. We were moving at, you know, breakneck speed to get through so many policy issues. We barely had time to celebrate and to really think and contemplate about the impact of what we were able to get into this package. It's a really rewarding thing to be able to review it in retrospect and think about the different issues here. At the end of the day, climate change is a massive challenge for us, and we are one state, but we felt we had a responsibility to do the best possible policy that we could at this moment in history with the legislature that we have and the opportunity that we have, and I think we delivered on that commitment. So we're really proud of what we were able to get in here. It's better for our economy. It will be better for health. It will be better for our environment. It will be better for the constituents that we serve, so all of the residents of our state, and hopefully it will make a positive impact and set us on a trajectory that is sustainable for our children. So those are the big takeaways that I have. And we have a long ways to go. As I said, we're one state. We need other states to be aggressive, to be ambitious, and to do the kinds of things that we are doing here in order for this all to work. So there's an element here where we are stepping out and doing this with the faith that others will also learn that they too can pass tough policy to make a difference on this. When I travel throughout the nation and meet other leaders of other chambers and legislatures throughout our country, they talk about what we are able to achieve here, and they want to know, you know, what's our secret, what are our tips, and you know, for us it was really just doing the best we could with the people we had, with the knowledge we knew, with the resources from the federal government, and just putting it all together and making the best possible package that we could. So there's a lot to feel good about here, and I am hopeful that others will follow in our path as well. And as we evaluate the effectiveness, we will learn a lot, and we'll keep on making improvements to this policy for the good of our state.
Yeah, absolutely. None of our panelists hit 20 seconds, but they all did a wonderful job. Big round of applause. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your interest in these issues, and we appreciate it. We're done. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, good job.